You are listening to the PFAS Research and Remediation podcast series, produced and created by Arcadis, with funding from the Environmental Security Technology Certification Program, ESTCP, grant number ER23-7692, through the United States Department of Defense. All opinions, interpretations, and conclusions expressed belong to the hosts and guests and do not represent views or policies of the Department of Defense, Arcadis, or guest affiliations. In this first season, we're focused on PFAS and interview a broad panel of experts who have each contributed to the growing knowledge base around remediating this emerging chemical of concern. Today, we'll be speaking with Dr. Paul Hatzinger, Director of Aptam's Technology Development Laboratory in Lawrenceville, New Jersey. Paul has served as a principal investigator on several DoD-sponsored research projects focused on per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS. In our conversation, we'll be highlighting his project ER20-5182, titled Validation of Colloidal Activated Carbon for Preventing the Migration of PFAS in Groundwater, which looks at the use of injectable carbon to immobilize PFAS constituents in situ. I'm Dr. Craig Devine, a technical expert with Arcadis, and I'll be your host today. Well, Paul, thanks for providing your time for this podcast, and look forward for you to highlight some of your work on PFAS generally. But before we get started, I was wondering if you could give us a brief summary of your role at Aptam and a little bit of your technical background, just a little bit of who you are.
Yeah, so I grew up in upstate New York, did undergrad work at St. Lawrence University in environmental studies. Primarily, I wanted to be a forest ranger. There's only, a couple forest rangers in upstate New York, so that didn't work out. Had a girlfriend at the time who was a vet student at Cornell, and I was working in lovely Lake Placid, New York, and decided to go back to grad school. So I drove down and interviewed at Cornell and basically started a PhD program in environmental toxicology. And then when my postdoc was done, I took a job at a small company called Envirogen. We were a biotechnology company that started up in the mid-'80s, and the idea was to bring together basically environmental engineers and microbiologists to try and improve, bioremediation, the whole art of bioremediation, and bring more science to it. At the time, in the mid-'80s and early '90s, there were a lot of sort of bag of bugs kind of salespeople. They're still there, but there was even more. Basically, we have this culture that can degrade everything from PCBs to benzene. It's aerobic, it's anaerobic. And so basically the whole industry was really sort of based upon, at the time, just really not the science that was coming out of the universities. But I now am director of a research and development group at Aptam, and there's still several of us there that date back to Envirogen, and that's, that was 20 years earlier. So, through that time, most of my work has been involved with emerging contaminants. And, we started out doing a lot of work with chlorinated solvents early on, right? That's still, a large part of our business, I think, for all of us. But, things sort of came along the way. One of them was perchlorate. So I spent a number of years working on perchlorate, and then NDMA, so nitrosamine, which is a rocket fuel component. And then from there, we went on to 1,4-dioxane. And then in the past 5 or 6 years, sort of this issue with PFAS, which, 6 or 7 years ago was called PFCs, perfluorinated compounds. The acronym was changed to one that's much more difficult to write about, whether it's PFASs or PFAS. And honestly, I kind of never saw coming sort of what's evolved from that. I don't know that anybody did.
Yeah, why do you think that is? I mean, what's different about this class of compounds, either technically or maybe socially, that you think is driving?
With PFAS, so you start to say, well, why are we looking at this so closely? And I think, it always sort of comes back to a couple of things. One is the toxicology, right? So how potent, toxicants are these different PFAS compounds? And I don't think we have an answer to that right now. Not yet. It's very, very complicated when you have these huge mixtures in terms of, what are we looking at? But the other issue with these is the fact that we can detect them and are concerned about them at a few nanograms per liter. It's almost unheard of that we're, at least in my career, that we're looking at compounds, when we have something that's, 50 nanograms per liter, and that's really of concern. And frankly, if we could detect all of the other contaminants that we work on and we're concerned about them in a few nanograms per liter, PFAS would probably wash into the background by comparison of other things that we know are out there,
Well, I think it's pretty interesting times for us to be on the front side of something like this and see how our industry, works its way through, and also hopefully takes advantage of the lessons from past contaminant classes that have been new at some time. So, well, transitioning a bit. So you're the PI for a new ESTCP project, ER205182, that's titled Validation of Colloidal Activated Carbon for Preventing the Migration of PFAS in Groundwater. So I can tell you there's a lot of interest in this project because the technology that it evaluates offers really one of the only potential solutions, or at least currently, for in situ management of PFAS impacted groundwater. So if you don't mind, could you just briefly outline the overall project and some of the major scope and, I would say, performance objective goals?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if we go back to what's different about PFAS, one of the things is that we currently don't have really good destructive mechanisms that we can apply in situ. If we look at our history of chlorinated solvent remediation, it took us a long time to sort it out, but there are biological degradation mechanisms that we began to figure out in the late 80s, early 90s. We saw that these things were degrading. We then say, okay, well, how's this happening? And over a period of 30 years, we sort all of that out. And now that's really, one of the major approaches we use to treat chlorinated solvents is bioremediation. But along the way, we also realized they're oxidizable, so you can use oxidants, and there's all sorts of oxidants you can use. What's different currently with PFAS, and perhaps it won't be in the long run, although I'm a bit skeptical, is that we don't have anything. So all of these tools in our toolbox that we use for chlorinated solvents haven't proven to be applicable in situ for PFAS. These structures are so chemically stable. They're also very diverse, right? They're chemically stable and they're diverse and they're present at very, very low concentrations. But we're yet to have any proof that in nature, bacteria are breaking these down to endpoints where we're no longer concerned. So we have a problem in that we have plumes. We're concerned about these compounds at nanograms per liter. They're moving toward endpoints. They're moving toward drinking water wells, or they're already impacting drinking water wells. So the question is, what can we do to prevent that migration somehow? So in the absence of being able to break things down, then the question becomes, can we stop them? So can we protect downgradient receptors or wells by putting in some type of barrier? This is certainly not new either. I mean, this is something we did for chlorinated solvents before we sort of understood the destructive part of this. And in some sense, that's what pump and treat is, right? I mean, pump and treat is putting in a hydraulic barrier. You pump the water up, you protect your downgradient receptors, and then you treat everything ex situ. And we're doing that quite a bit for PFAS. But what can you do in situ? So one of those options is to try and enhance its absorption so that as it moves into some zone, it absorbs to a matrix of some type and then doesn't move any further. Now, so the question then is, how do you do that? So a number of years ago, people started looking at carbon compounds. So we use granular activated carbon ex situ to treat all sorts of things. That's kind of our main medium that we use to absorb contaminants. So people started looking at whether you could put this into the ground somehow. But typically, this was basically accompanied by a destructive process. So there are, to my knowledge, at least 4 commercial products that, date back probably a decade, where they would be injected into the ground. And the idea was the contaminant would absorb to the carbon, but it was also injected with either an oxidant or nutrients to grow bacteria. So the carbon sort of absorbs and accumulates the compound, but the bacteria then either break it down or the oxidant breaks it down. So you have a combined, it's like a sorptive barrier with destruction.
Sort of a trap and treat strategy.
Trap and treat, right, right. Now, there's a compound called plume-stop, which is basically a colloidal carbon. Now, one of the difficulties with all of these carbons, carbon comes in kind of different sizes, let's say. So our granular activated carbon that we use in reactors is probably on the order of, if you look at dimension, 0.5 millimeter to a millimeter, granular size particles. There's a powdered carbon that then gets down on the order of, say 50 to 250 micrometers. And then there's colloidal carbon, which is sort of a newer thing, which is really small. It's bacterial size, like 1 to 2 micron diameter particles. The problem is when you inject something into the ground, in a sandy aquifer, you have pores. And if something gets trapped in those pores, it doesn't distribute very far. And also, if you're using low pressure, you really can't get it into the ground. So most of these products early on were larger diameter particles. And the way they were emplaced is that you pump them in under very high pressure and you do what's called fracking. I mean, we all hear about fracking for gas and oil, but in this case, you're creating a zone where the contaminants will move out of a tight formation like a clay into this more porous zone. But in order to get it in there, you have to inject under really high pressure. The difference with the colloidal product, and that's what we're looking at in this ESTCP project, is that it's very, very small particles. So you can emplace it and it will distribute over a wide distance. So you could actually create a barrier that has some dimension. It's not just going to be right around your injection point, and you can do this under low pressure. So because the particles are so small, they're small enough to move through the pores in the sand in the aquifer. So that's what makes this a little bit different. It was developed for chlorinated solvents. It was always meant to be injected with nutrients to grow bacteria. But as PFAS came along, as everybody did, we looked at all of our existing technologies and said, wow, might this work for PFAS? And essentially, the company that's putting this out is named Regenesis. It's one of their products. And I think as we move along, there's going to be more of this type of material. But they basically came out and said, yeah, I think this works pretty well for PFAS. You know, our lab work shows that, and we'd like to start doing this in situ. So as we sort of took a look at that, and the ESTCP program had a request for proposals out that basically they were interested in just the distribution of amendments was one of the things that they were asking about at that time. So basically, I was kind of looking at that and reading a bit about these colloidal carbon amendments, and it just sort of came to my mind that there wasn't a literature yet behind this. So there wasn't really a good basic literature or a literature of, sort of applications in the field where people had published studies showing a variety of things like how long does it last? Is this a solution that lasts a year or 20 years? At what point? And the idea is you can apply this in different ways, but, one is you put in a cutoff barrier. So you have a plume that's, always obviously flowing with the direction of groundwater. So you put a barrier wall in. So you go in and you inject this material over the depth and width so that you have enough residence time for the material flowing through. So say, on a small plume of barrier that's 50 feet wide by, 50 feet deep in the groundwater, and then, maybe 10 feet along the direction of groundwater flow so that, water flows through the material.
It's really fascinating because I was curious on, at least at this stage, what your anticipation is the most likely use application scenario looks like.
Yeah.
I imagine your project is going to evaluate that in that specific use case, but have you thought about how this integrates with other remedy strategies, how it integrates with, let's say, source activities or maybe an enhanced attenuation or M&A? How does this fit within our kind of toolbox of technologies for a PFAS site?
And that's a great question. In terms of this current project, we're really looking at as a source, as a means to reduce the mass flux from a source. So I think you have multiple applications of this. And in its simplest form, you're increasing the fraction of organic carbon in an aquifer is what you're doing. I mean, you're not doing much more than that, right? So you're increasing the absorptive capacity of an aquifer. So, in source areas, obviously, one of the concerns is, and there's a lot of CERT-up ESTCP research going on, but you have these areas where you've got a lot of PFAS caught up in the vadose zone, right? So you're caught up in the unsaturated zone, and there's work by a lot of really good people now that are sort of looking at that and trying to understand what that source zone does over time. So if you get big rainfall events, say in New Jersey, where you can get rapid recharge, are you putting a lot of PFAS down into an aquifer? So you have this continuing source that's going to be a problem for years and years and continue to resupply this plume that's running down gradient of it. So the question is that the case? It certainly does seem to be so, although there's complexities to it all with the way these compounds interact. But that being said, so if you can do a couple of things. You can remove the barrier, right? So you can remove the source area rather. So you can go dig up the source area and then remove as much of this material as you can, put in clean fill. So it's like what we've done historically for chlorinated solvent sites. We remove the source. But there's also the potential that becomes too expensive or it's too deep. So then the question becomes, can we put in this type of material in a source zone just to reduce the amount of contaminants that are coming out of that zone and sort of refueling a plume down gradient? And I think that's a very good use of it. And can you combine it with other things? Well, yeah, I mean, maybe you also need to think about a vadosone sorptive technology. If you're not going to remove the source, can you add an amendment? And maybe it's not this, maybe it's something else. But, maybe you go into the source zone, you mix in an amendment that absorbs as much as you can very tightly. And then you also add this in the saturated zone below it, where again, because of the small particle size, you can get it distributed. And then, so you trap what's coming from the vadosone down with treatment A in the unsaturated zone. And then you trap what's down in the saturated zone with the colloidal carbon. So I think that's a great potential application.
Yeah. So what you're describing, I mean, fundamentally, this is a mass flux reduction technology. And there's two places generally you think about focusing those technologies, and that's in a source area that represents the strength of the plume, basically. And then also, of course, at some important control point that is up gradient in some fashion of either a property boundary or a potential receptor, right? So it's a safety net, and in that function, it's acting as sort of your safety net and seatbelt. And, in an upgradient scenario, it's mass flux reduction to sort of quiet out the plume or starve out the plume. Do you see an application plume-wide? Is this something that you'd go through a whole plume and sort of carpet bomb? And what are you thinking about that?
That ultimately might be too costly. At this point, I don't know that there are solutions. There are trade-offs. And that's kind of the way we need to think, so what's our top priority with this, where we have some, again, and this has always been a dilute plume sort of issue, even with chlorinated solvents, how do we deal with these plumes that are still above regulatory levels of concern, but are over very wide areas? In a lot of sites, that's where you want to get at the end, is the material's attenuating before it gets to the receptors that we're concerned about. I think that will still be an aspect here. It may not be biodegradation or destruction, but there are other processes, sorption, dilution, that sort of thing. Now, can you inject a whole plume? I don't think so. Can you put in a barrier wall? I mean, you can probably do that over reasonable distances, presuming that the plume is relatively shallow, because it's the same limitations that we have throughout the whole industry. You've got to inject this into the ground. And if the plume is 500 feet below ground surface, everything becomes expensive. It becomes difficult to do that,
Yeah, I think, the industry's matured a lot, and not just for this contaminant class, but others. It's recognized that there's a toolbox of solutions, and that you apply multiple tools. And each solution set might look different given the problems. And so I see, that's one of the key goals of your project, is to really define sort of the sweet spot. And I imagine, you're going to lead to possibly design practices and evaluate potential failure modes.
Well, there's a couple of things. One is when you make carbon, there's different ways that carbon gets made, and but it's a charged material, and typically carbon is cationic; it's positively charged. Now, typically aquifer materials are anionic. There's silicas, there's clays that are negatively charged. So if you just went in and injected this positively charged material, you're probably not going to get very good distribution. So, one of the things that people need to do when they start thinking about this is, how do we get it distributed? And the colloidal carbon material that I talked about before, which is called plume stop, they use a polymer basically, and it does a couple of different things. Is it keeps the material in suspension, so it keeps the colloids in suspension. So it sort of stabilizes that so the material's not dropping out. But it also gives it sort of a net negative charge. So you can almost think of it, I guess, like the polymer kind of, taking care of the positive charge material. So it allows it to move further in an aquifer. So that's sort of that's a characteristic that we don't see for a lot of the things that we inject, which are carbon sources, right? We inject things like lactate and emulsified oils and those sort of things pretty routinely these days. But that's one of the things. And that's where there's, still some science probably to go, because as I said, all of these products and pretty much everything we use was not developed for PFAS. It's been developed for other things.
You mentioned before some questions about longevity and overall capacity. That's not just presence absence. That's how much loading did you achieve?
Exactly.
And there's going to be some design targets on that loading.
Yep.
So I assume that'll help you sort of assess, actual loading versus design. And then maybe there's some performance on actual loading and what sort of treatment do you see associated with that? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. did you get the material where it needs to be? And the only way you can do that is pretty much, again, taking cores and trying to quantify it. So,
and did you get it at levels you need, right? Or what are the levels you achieved?
Are there areas where you didn't get levels of these?
Yeah.
If your overall goal is reduction in mass flux, right? Then, perhaps it doesn't have to be perfect. If you can get a 95 or 99% reduction, perhaps you've done a pretty good job. And an expectation that in the subsurface, you can distribute something, even in a simple, what would be considered a simple geology, it's challenging, right? It's a very challenging thing to do. But you do need to quantify it. Other questions are, again, longevity. And typically these estimates are on the order of 30 plus years. 30 plus years of effectiveness in terms of absorbing at least the longer chain compounds.
Right.
Now, with all of these materials, including the colloidal carbon, the smaller chain compounds are still problematic.
Sure. Right.
And they just don't absorb well to most materials.
Yeah.
And people are working on that.
Right.
Fortunately, at this point, at least from what I've seen in terms of EPA HALs, it seems like for some of the shorter chain compounds, they're much higher in terms of concentration. So you can allow more of it to sort of break through before there's a level of regulatory concern. We'll see how that plays out over the long run. But I think with any of these in situ sort of approaches at this point, that they're going to continue to be a problem, and ex situ approaches. It's just, ion exchange resins absorb them a little bit better. So one of our questions is, well, is this material going to change just the groundwater flow rate through the aquifer?
Yeah.
And that's that
filtering effect or hydraulic clogging or other processes might
so is water going to start to flow around the barrier at some period of time? And I don't think, again, I don't know that there's any answer to that at this point. So one way to get at that is, well, you can use piezometers, right? So you can start looking at changes in groundwater levels. So if you put in your amendment, either in a source area or as a barrier, having piezometers around the edges or sort of in the middle, and do you see changes in groundwater with time?
Yeah, it seems to me a natural outcome. You're certainly going to find some opportunities for improving current practice. And I could imagine part of your delivery will be sort of a guidance on current state of the technology. In addition to sort of evaluating these potential failure modes, in a rigorous sense at the field level.
The question that I often get just related to this project is, but are you really solving anything? No, okay, so now you've got it here. Now it's still in the aquifer. It's still adsorbed to carbon.
Yeah.
Is that really a solution? And I guess I kind of go back to my point where, there are no solutions yet. There's trade-offs.
Yeah.
Right. And the trade-off for this is, yes, it's still going to be in the ground. You're going to know where it is, right? You're going to have increasing concentrations of PFAS in this zone where you put the material in, or if it's a source area, no, but it's going to be, more tightly absorbed there. But that to me is over 10 years or 20 years or 30 years right now, sort of the best we have. And if in 10 years, it turns out there's some oxidant that someone discovers that can oxidize this stuff, then, perhaps you can inject that into these zones. Maybe there is a phase 2 where, we've trapped it.
You've trapped it. It's, where it is.
Right.
Well, Paul, this is great. Really appreciate your time. And I'll restate, I can tell you a lot of people are very much interested in this project because I think they see it the same way you do, that it's a tool that's got an immediate application and there's a need to really understand sort of the best fit. So thank you for your work on it and look forward to the results.
It's been a lot of fun, Craig. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening. This podcast was funded by ESTCP and produced by Arcadis. The interview was conducted by Craig Devine, and our guest today was Dr. Paul Hatzinger. If you're interested in more information on Paul's project, please visit serdp-estcp.org and search for the project number ER20-5182. If you have conducted your own research on PFAS and are interested in sharing your work, please email Teresa Gillette at teresa.gillette@arcadis.com. That's THERESA.GUILLETTE at Arcadis, ARCADIS.com. And please keep an eye out for more episodes coming soon.